everyone, and welcome to Cheer New York, my Black experience. My name is Matthew Brown. I am the Assistant Athletic Director of Cheer New York. I've been a part of the team for 4 years now.
And I am Abby Jones-Corbin, also part of the athletics department, the head coach of the Crown half of Cheer New York. And I've also been on the team for 4 years. Matthew and I
We joined together
the same season. We didn't know each other before, so everybody just stopped tripping on that.
Yeah.
It was just organic, and that's how we're going to make it go.
Yeah.
Very good.
So we're going to go through a couple questions. We'll bounce back and forth and just have an organic conversation. So you want to handle the first question?
Sure. So basically, my Black experience, how I got started in cheerleading. I am actually, let me just put it out there, I'm 48 years old. I have 2 grown children, a daughter who is 20 and a son who will be 24 in 2 weeks. And I started off cheerleading physically as a performing member just with Cheer New York in the past 4 years. Prior to that, I was a coach from the rec level, high school level, middle school level, for like 15 years with my goddaughter, and then with my own daughter in the state of Maryland, and then moving up here to New York. So that's how I got started in cheerleading, was actually coaching first, because I used to tease people until I realized I could actually cheer 4 years ago. I used to say that if you, if you don't know how to do, you teach. So I said, if you don't know how to cheer, you coach. But I've been corrected. Now I can do both. And Matthew is actually probably has been cheering as long as I've been coaching.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's revealing my age a little bit. I got started in cheerleading. I was about 7 years old. My mother was like Abby. She was the team mom / coach, and my sister and cousin were cheerleaders. And my father was a football coach, and my brother was a football player. So me being young, it was like, okay, what can he do while we're all doing this? So they made me the mascot of the team, and that just flourished into me doing everything that the rest of the girls were doing, and I just kept cheering. And so now here we are, 20...
Don't lie.
27 years later. And I am still coaching and cheering.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So what has your experience been since you've been doing that so long, from the age of 7 as a young Black boy to now being an adult male?
Okay. That experience has been different. I have to say that growing up in the South, cheerleading in the 90s, 90s, early 2000s. It seems so long ago. It was already a big flourishing thing. It was already considered a sport, but it was a sport that was predominantly for young white women. It was white girls. That's predominantly growing up. That's mainly what I cheered with. In high school, you could count out of about almost 40 cheerleaders on one hand the amount of cheerleaders in the whole school, of Black cheerleaders. So it was very different, but I got the bug at a young age that I knew that this was something that I wanted to extend within the Black community. So I was the one in high school rallying, trying to get all the Black girls to come try out for the cheerleading squad, or the ones who I felt were good enough that would make it to come try out for the team, because I wanted it to flourish. I wanted it to be more than just the white girl and the few specks of Black people.
Correct.
And then I started noticing, even with the Black people who were cheerleaders, like the Black girl that I was on the team with, 9 times out of 10, she's a cheerleader now because her older sister was a cheerleader.
Correct.
It wasn't because it was anybody different. So it also kind of became the same families, the same people who were cheering. When I was in school, we had one of the girls that was with me and 2 of her sisters. So 3 of the Black cheerleaders were all sisters at the same time.
Right. On the same team.
On the same team, between varsity and JV. So it never went any further than that. And I just always wanted to pull more Black into it. And it was the same going to college. It was predominantly white.
Well, I know for me, being the parent and watching, well, first my goddaughter, because I took her back and forth to, practices, and her being one of the, like you said, the few specs. And then my daughter, who was the mascot at the time, coming up and wanting to do what she saw her older god sister do. So then that was down south. That was in Maryland, again, in the South. So moving when my daughter was in middle school up here to New York, she's looking for the same opportunity, but being more northern, less opportunity in cheerleading, period. Correct. And then even less opportunity for a young woman of color, a Black young lady. So when we got up here, and I had friends who had young ladies and young daughters, there was a rec team. Usually there's always a rec team somewhere, because there's always a football team. Yes. So they throw together, and that's what I noticed, they throw together a little cheerleading squad, mostly as the additional babysitter to the sibling of the boy. Football, yes. Because football, in our community is the stronger push, and the cheerleading is just because most of them have little sisters, and so as extra. So I became, again, another teen mom, another push. But as my daughter, you sound like her, when she got the bug. She got the bug early. So then what are we going to do after she ages out of rec? Rec league, where does she go? As a single Black mother, or even if I was probably married at the time, with 2 incomes, where am I going to send her after she ages out? If high school doesn't have, most high schools in New York City, urban, especially in the 5 boroughs, don't have cheerleading.
Much less any other.
Much less other sports for young women, except, the norms, it's just, money. But where would I send her to an all-star gym? All-star gyms are in Long Island. You have to pay, you have to pay for lessons, you have to pay for tumbling, thousands of dollars. And that's just not something that as a Black mother, a Black experience, I didn't at that time feel that I'd have to travel her all the way out there. And again, she would still be the spec. So what happens? My daughter asked me, "Mommy, can you volunteer and start this team?" Really? Word? That's what you want me to do? Volunteer.
So I'm still stuck.
Coach, I thought I got away with it. But the same way you said, wanting to bring in the people in your community, the people in the Black community, I saw an opportunity for me to give young Black women and young Black men the opportunity to be a part of a sport that most people don't think they should be a part of. I mean, think about the Serena Williams, the Venus Williams. They're not supposed to be tennis phenoms.
Correct.
Think about Simone Biles and the Gabby Douglas. They're not supposed to be
the Tiger Woods.
The Tiger Woods. They're not. These are those sports that we're not supposed to excel in. So my goal was like, well, let me do this. Let me give an opportunity to these young Black children and youth to excel in something that they're not expected to, and 2, find a way for them to afford it.
Right.
So how did you approach being, as we're looking at it, younger and now older, now we're on an adult team, as still to this day on an adult team, still not that many Black members. And it's because this is the type of sport where most of the time you start young in order to excel early. I am the exception, starting at 45 of being a cheerleader. Not to say that anybody couldn't do it, but how do you approach this? How do you handle that as you're, what do you do with this?
I think that it's kind of something that is instilled in you, because growing up, you learn to be, especially us as Black people, to be tough and to strive and push through hard times, because we're taught that they are coming. When you're younger, you're always taught to know that life is 9 times out of 10 not going to be easy for you. So you have to learn how to push through anything that comes your way, even something in someone's mind as simple as cheerleading.
But at any time while you were doing this, and even now,
Mm-hmm.
so at any time during your 20 plus years of being an athlete, a Black athlete,
Okay.
in a sport where you're not necessarily the norm,
Mm-hmm.
how do you handle? Do you say, okay, when I go into this, I'm going to take my Blackness and put it in my pocket, or I'm not going to be who I am, or as Black as I can be, or am I? You understand what I'm saying?
Yes. I think that, to be honest, when I was younger, I felt like because of my environment and what in my mind at that time cheerleading was, do I feel like at some moments maybe, let's say like my freshman year, I'll say this. My freshman year of high school, being on JV, we got a new coach. And the coach was a former cheerleader. And she was actually, she was the JV coach, but varsity, it was almost like the varsity coach was the head coach, and whoever came in for JV was still under the varsity coach. So at that time, she's actually the same. She actually graduated with my older brother. So she's only 6 years older. She was only 6 years older. So she was in college at the time. And in the beginning, I felt like there were moments where I did pull back from being as loud or as urban, because you're around a lot of, not to be rude, but white girls from South Carolina, from the country. So you try not to stand out too much all the time. 18 kids on JV, there were only 3 of us that were Black. Myself and 2 other girls. And I felt like at times I did put it on hold. But what stopped that was when I noticed, and it wasn't even myself, and I'm an amazing dancer, but we were at practice one day, and I will never forget it till this day. We were at practice one day outside on the grass in front of the school, and she was making a formation. And I noticed in the formation, all 3 of the Black people were on the back row. And I'm thinking to myself, like, wait a minute, hold on. Now, should I say something or should I not? But then at that time, especially, okay, Matthew, wait, you're a boy. So that probably, even though you are the best dancer on the team.
Okay.
Even though you are the best dancer on the team.
Okay.
But that's the reason why you're probably, I was in the center.
Yeah.
But one of these other girls, Sade, she's another one of the best dancers on the team. Why is she standing beside me on the back row, and all of these girls that are in front of her, she can outdance?
Correct.
Something isn't right. And that was the moment that kind of made me realize, no, you can't just push us in the back just because we are the few that are here, and you feel like, oh, these other girls should be seen. And that is what actually made me stop putting my Blackness on hold for cheerleading. That is what made me start pushing to say, you know what? Like you said, this is something that isn't always afforded to young Black kids, but let me be the push, let me be the voice, let me be the person to try and push us forward and make this lane where, okay, it's back to how people always say representation matters.
Yeah.
If you don't see it when you're younger, if you're not used to seeing other Black cheerleaders, or if you're only used to seeing 1 or 2 out of 20, you're going to automatically think, oh, that's not something that I should do. That's not something that's for me. But the more that you see, the more that it makes you want to do. And what about you?
For me, it was the different styles of cheerleading when it came to being a coach and wanting to bring these young ladies together. Because for the rec team here in New York that we started with, they played in Nassau and Suffolk County. Okay. So the cheerleading competitions that the young girls we were asked to go to were all in Nassau and Suffolk County. And for those of you that are not aware, Nassau and Suffolk County, Long Island is predominantly white, and so are predominantly the schools and the rec teams, again, with the specs. And our team was from Southeast Jamaica in Queens, which is predominantly Black. So our team, the rec team that we started with, was all Black, Black girls. And so traveling out to Long Island and looking at the different styles and what we would all, and this is what made me realize that there are different styles and it's a subjective sport. We would always win the best dance category in our cheerleading routine. That was a consistent. But we would always play second, third, or whatever in the other parts, in the cheer, or and I would always wonder, like, are they trying to say something? Or I mean, I know we dance, but I wanted more than just the dance ribbon. I wanted the young ladies to master all the different styles. And as I've gained experience in different things, there's traditional style. There's, now they call it the urban style. There's the stomp and shake style. UCA, NDA, there's all the different styles. And the one thing that I didn't want us to be put in a box, right, that all we could do was either stomp and shake or traditional or just dance. We could do nothing else but that. So as I moved in with my daughter when we left the rec and we made it into middle school and high school, and I became, and started to take it on, I still took them out to these competitions because I wanted them to see, like you said, representation matters, but I wanted them to realize that they were going to be the representatives in this new environment. They were going to be the representatives, and I didn't want them to go in looking like deers caught in the headlights. Right. I didn't want them to go in thinking that, oh, we can't do that or we're not good enough. So I told them, I said, no matter what we do, like we went to our first competition the first year. I think out of the 30 girls I had that first year, the only one that ever cheered before was my daughter. Okay. So I took 29 brand new newbies at the that were in 6th through 11th grade and put them on the floor in front of young ladies that had been cheering and flipping and doing all this since they were little. And I said, we're going to take our stuff onto the mat. We are competing against ourselves so that we can get our information and our critiques back so that we can be better. And that was how I had to make them understand that we're not, even though when the people see us walk in, we are 30 Black women at the time, 30 Black women coming in to a sport we've never done, you have never done before. And I want you to just go in there and do the best you can. Be proud that you put whatever it was on the mat, and come back, and we're going to regroup. Right. And so that was how I handled that. And I was trying to handle that for them as well as for myself. Mind you, how many Black coaches are there? Even though you may have young Black women on teams and young Black men, there's not very many coaches. Nope. So it just kept me going. And most people are like, well, why do you have to keep talking about it as black and white? Because that's who I am. Yes, it's a part of who you are. That is part of our identity. That's who we are. Yes. We are. When I walk out of the house, no matter what day it is, no matter how tired I am, whether I'm going to work, play, or wherever, I will always be seen as a Black woman. Correct. You will always be seen as a Black man. No matter what. Always. Well, no matter what my sexual preference is, no matter what is it we in the vote now? What is it? My party. Where I vote. Red or blue. All that. Red or blue. And the first thing that I wake up every morning and we go and we do, this is who we are. So that is, our identity. Yes. But when was the first time, barring cheerleading? Okay. When was the first time that you really acknowledged that you were Black? Can you remember that?
I don't know if I can actually remember the first time that I
don't want to say that I was different, but
I think that I knew, especially growing up in the South, because now living in New York, but growing up in the South, New York, it really is a melting pot. Mm-hmm. You have so many people from so many different backgrounds. Caribbean, African, Latina, white, European, like from everywhere. But back then, especially in the 90s, early 2000s in the South, it was really only Black and white. There wasn't a lot of Latina, there wasn't a lot of Asian, those were very few, far and in between. What you saw were Black people and white people. So you automatically knew that there was a difference. And you not only knew it, because one thing that I always try to tell people, especially in the times that we grew up, we didn't grow up in a time that was that far from slavery. We didn't grow up in a time that was that far from segregation.
And I'm older than you, so you know.
Exactly.
I'm even closer.
It wasn't that far from segregation. So there were still people that grew up back in the time when I was little, whose parents, like kids that I went to school with, whose parents were still very prejudiced.
Yes.
And in elementary school, I went to a predominantly white elementary school. So I automatically knew at that time, wait, I'm a little different, and it's not many people in the school that look like me. So I learned then that, okay, wait, I am a little different. And then it pushed even further being a smart Black man, because then I was in the gifted and talented program. And guess what? I'm in elementary school, and I was the only Black person. It was just me by myself.
I didn't realize how much we are similar in our growing up, even though I am years older than you. Because I grew, even though I lived in Maryland and that's where my family, you know, I raised my family and started and came back to, I was raised here in New York City. So I went to elementary school, middle school, and high school right here in Queens, back when we were bused. Because of segregation. So they were trying to, so I remember my neighborhood, I lived not too far from where I am now, all Black neighborhood, wonderful, you know, middle class. You know, Queens back then is what Brooklyn is now.
Okay.
So you moved to Queens from Brooklyn.
Okay.
Like most people move from Manhattan to Brooklyn. Where they're moved, you know, where everybody. So you back then, your family was well-to-do if you moved from Brooklyn to Queens. So my mother's family was born and raised in Bed-Stuy. And as they got married and became middle class or whatever, they moved to Queens. However, once we got here, and I don't know if everybody knows about it, but it was the white sprawl, like they left. So as soon as we moved into these neighborhoods, they moved more east, going into Long Island. So I lived here, and the schools weren't as good, you know, and my mom was all about education. Like, I know your mom was a teacher. My mom wasn't a teacher, but she's all about education and making sure her children had, you know, the best education. So I went to school close to my neighborhood for Montessori school, 1st and 2nd grade. When it was time to go, because the gifted and talented school only went K through 2. Okay. So I went from Montessori right into 1st grade, 2nd grade. All of a sudden, I'm walking 6 blocks in the morning by myself as a 3rd grader to a bus stop across from a school that I should be going to get on a bus to go to a school in a totally different district. Dropped us down. It was a bus load of us. And the bus went to 2 different schools.
But was the bus load all Black kids?
The bus was full of Black kids, taking us to 2 different white schools in different districts. And I remember at first, you know, when you're that age, what's this, 3rd grade? I don't even know how old that is. You're not aware of why it's happening. You're like, okay, my mom told me to get on the bus, I'm going. But I think it took me a year being in the school to realize how much I was different. And the first time I felt a prejudice was from my 4th grade teacher, who assumed that myself and the other Black young lady, it was only out of 30 kids. So, you know, in New York, classrooms are from 30 to 35 kids. So we were full. So we had to have between 30 and 35 kids. Out of the 30, 35, there were maybe 5 of us that were Black. It was definitely 1 Black young man and 4 Black young girls. And 2 of us, again, we have big personalities. Didn't realize it
at that age.
But that's just but there were other kids with big personalities, but for some reason we stuck out. And my 4th grade teacher actually gave us a name, Storm Cloud 1 and Storm Cloud 2. And I was like, I came home and told Mom, why is this teacher telling me and Dawn that we're Storm Cloud 1 and Storm Cloud 2? And I knew something wasn't right when Millicent Jones.
When you saw her reaction.
Decided that the next morning
she would go into that school.
And parents don't not go to work back then. And we took a taxi because we didn't even have a car to the school, and she met with the principal. And I was kind of confused. I was like, well, she just called me Storm Cloud 1, Storm Cloud 2. However, she gave no one else that type of connotation
right.
or situation. And so I was like, that's a problem.
Correct.
That's a problem. I don't like that. And then I think at that moment, then my eyes were open to the fact that, hey, different.
I'm different.
I'm totally different.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I was smart. And the education, plays a part in it. Correct. So it just, even though I'm probably one generation higher than you.
Yeah. Not that far. Only a couple of years. Only a few years.
10 makes a generation.
Yeah,
10 makes a generation. So I'm gonna leave it at that. Yeah. It's amazing to just think that, like you said, we are not that far removed
from when things were
very different. And now it feels like we're coming back.
Correct.
To where we thought.
But they always say times repeat themselves.
Yes.
Time repeats itself.
So even though we're in these times, what keeps you going as a Black man, gay Black man, young man? What keeps you inspired and going to say, I'm Black and I'm proud?
My family.
Mm-hmm.
My family. Definitely my family.
Mama Brown.
Exactly. I come from a very strong, close-knit family, and I think I learned at a young age, seeing my grandmother and my grandfather raise 8 kids during the times that they did. And my family is very educated, well-to-do, so it instills something in me saying, okay, Matthew, you can, you must, you have to. And I also had Cynthia in my ear saying, you can, you must, you have to.
It was a must.
Yeah, like it wasn't an option. And it's funny because sometimes us as Black people, we praise that, but it's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing, because not saying that you shouldn't strive to be great, but in a lot of cases, we don't have any other choice but to push and strive to be great, because there are already so many other odds stacked against us.
We're almost pushed. We have to be greater.
Yes. There you go.
We don't have to be great.
We have to be better.
We have to be greater. And why is that? Because of the
stigmas on our community, the implicit biases on our community. so many
the microaggressions that people don't realize.
Yes, that they have that they put on us. So we just always feel like we have to rise above.
That's not a word. But I tell you this much. My mother had 2 children. My brother, he's so well educated, he's intelligent, and he was growing up. I remember him, he's 11 years older than me. So you can only imagine, like, I looked up to him and looked at the difference. So during the 70s, when I'm a little kid, he's, teenager.
Right.
Preteen to a teenager, apartheid. And I learned a lot of my history and what's going on in the world from watching how my mother and my brother reacted to news stories, reacted to things going on in their own life. Yeah, my brother, I would go in his room, and you know how most kids growing up had, Right On magazine. This was back, okay, we're dating ourselves right now, folks. We're dating ourselves. Everybody doesn't do this now, but we used to take the posters out of the magazine,
hang them on the wall.
But it was always, someone, a musician or an actor, whatever. My brother had anti-apartheid posters and, Bob Marley, all these. And I'm looking at these posters, and these aren't Cuba, fight Cuba activists. He was an activist at the time. My mother was a continual activist, always, making sure, NAACP,
Same.
PTAs, whatever was going on. She was a community affairs director for Verizon, one of the first Black managers. Okay. It's Verizon now. I'm sorry, I'm dating again. Ma Bell, the New York telephone company, Bell Atlantic. I don't even know if any of you know who these people are. They are now Verizon. So my mom was back in the day when it was a monopoly before they broke it all up.
Right.
And so, again, there were a lot of firsts that I could reach out and touch.
Right.
Whereas I look at some of our young people now,
they don't get that.
And they don't get it.
They don't understand.
But see, now that some things in our world are going backwards,
they're getting
they're starting to get a taste of it, and they don't like it. And you know how when we look back, some people say, "Oh, I couldn't have been a slave." You would not have had this.
Anything different.
You would not have had this mentality that you have
Correct.
now, this education that you have now. So it's almost like, and then you also have those that say, those were my, those that own slaves now say, those were my ancestors, not me. However, that may have been your ancestors, but unless you change some of your thinking and how you interact, some of that still
carries over. Yes,
so, everyone now is trying to understand how we got here, why we're here, and then
how do we move on from here?